सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
India-Nepal relations have been strained for some time. They are not exactly in the pink of health, particularly since 2015. We go back to the blockade, etc., etc. But still, it is rare to see India or Nepal lodging an official protest with each other, especially over a border issue, because we would believe that India-Nepal border is almost settled. It is settled. So the truth is, it is settled, but almost settled. About 98 to 99% of the India-Nepal border has been settled. Pillars have been installed. The border has been demarcated. Maps have been exchanged. But just about, say, roughly 1.5% area still has a little problem. So this protest has come up about one of those areas called Lipulekh Pass. You've obviously been hearing about Lipulekh Pass over the last couple of days, because on Friday, Rajnath Singh, the defense minister, inaugurated remotely a new road which has been built from Pithoragarh going up to Lipulekh Pass. This road will reduce pilgrimage time to Mansarovar Lake and Kailash-Mansarovar by about 3 to 5 days. Now, this is a big change. So this road was celebrated and inaugurated immediately. The Nepalese protested, saying that the road had been built through what they consider as their territory, and it was going through Lipulekh Pass. It's a very important and very strategic pass in the Himalayas, connecting Uttarakhand's Pithoragarh district. Pithoragarh district's sort of easternmost, northern and easternmost end with Tibet, and it's a pass at 20,060, a little over 20,000 feet. So a very high pass. It's also a pass where China and India, or Tibetans and Indians, have been holding border trade now for quite some time, traditionally in the past also, historically, but now also formally. So usually the route for going to Kailash-Mansarovar from here was to go to Pithoragarh. You can take a bus to go to Pithoragarh. It's a tough ride, but you can get to Pithoragarh. After Pithoragarh, then you take a 107.6 kilometer drive to a place called Tawa Ghat. From Tawa Ghat, then you have a 20 kilometer or a 19.5 kilometer single road. So not big buses can't go there. On that road, then you get from Tawa Ghat to a place called Ghatyabgarh. From Ghatyabgarh, you again have to now walk. From Ghatyabgarh, after taking 19.5 kilometers by a single lane road, it's a very tough road, to Ghatyabgarh. Then you walk 80 kilometers to get to Lipulekh. That 80 kilometers is a rough walk, can take up to 5 days. Also accidents take place, landslides take place, weather can change. It's quite hazardous. So this new road, which is now 74.5 kilometers long, covers for that distance. What that does is, it takes you straight to Lipulekh Pass. So almost the entire road has been built. Just last 3-4 kilometers have to be built. At this point, you can walk that last 4-5 kilometers. It will take you a few hours. Or, as Nitin Gari said to me in off the cuff last week, it's a matter of another 6 months before this is also done. Now, this was quite a remarkable road building project. And why was it important? It was important for strategic reasons and tactical reasons, but it was also important because Indian pilgrims have 3 routes to go to Kailash-Mansarovar. One is Pithoragarh, one is through Kathmandu, one is through Nathula in Sikkim. Now both the routes, through Nathula in Sikkim and through Nepal, through Kathmandu and then through Nepal, are longer, much longer, way longer in terms of distance, but more convenient, because you can do most of those routes by road on a vehicle. Whereas this is the shortest route via Pithoragarh, but it is also the most tough and the most hazardous and takes the longest. Yet, on this route, if you go to Kailash-Mansarovar, you do about 85% of your journey within Indian territory. Whereas, if you take any of the other routes, you are doing more than 80% of your journey in Chinese territory, in Tibet. For example, look at the map. See if you cross from Nathula, how far is Kailash-Mansarovar? Or if you cross from Nepal, how far is Kailash-Mansarovar? Once again, it also gives you an idea of how big these regions are, how big Tibet is, how big Nepal is, and of course, how big India is, that we know. So, this is the shortest route, the most convenient route. There was need to build this road. This project had been cleared in 2005 when Manmohan Singh was in power under UPA 1. At that point, as happens in India quite often, at that point, project was going to cost only 18.76 crores. Then it was held in abeyance, I suspect, partly because of defense clearances and partly because of environmental clearances, because tinkering with the Himalayas, particularly around Kumaon, Garhwal. There are also sensitivities about holy rivers. It's been a tough thing to do. And UPA lost direction on these projects very early while they were in power. 2018, Cabinet Committee on Security once again cleared this project. By this time, though, the project was costing 439.4 crores. But this was cleared, and credit to Nitin Gadkari, who took charge of Border Roads Organization's project and got it done. In fact, so difficult was mountain cutting and tunneling and boring in that area that equipment, machinery had to be airlifted by Indian Air Force's Mi-26 helicopters. This is the biggest helicopter in the world, much bigger than the American Chinook. So these helicopters were used to lift this machinery. In fact, Nitin Gadkari said so in our off-the-cuff earlier last week. Now this project is done, and when it was done, it was inaugurated by Rajnath Singh. Now the fact is that this project was being built all these years. Nepalese did not protest. But because there was an inauguration now, and this made a story everywhere, they were constrained to protest. They had no choice but to protest. And now once again, when the last few kilometers are built, and I'm quite sure this is Modi government, everything has to become an event. Maybe Prime Minister Modi lands up there, or something happens, or the first jatha of Indian pilgrims through Lipulekh now goes. There will be celebrations, and there will be an event, or there will be noise from Nepal. Now, we have to see where is this noise from Nepal coming from. So we have to understand that region. Think of, so this is north, this is south, this is east, this is west. Now, on the east, India extends along the Himalayas. So imagine India is extending like this along the Himalayas, and this is where the distant states of the northeast, Arunachal, etc., and Arunachal, Assam, Nagaland, etc. And now along this, just after Tibet, then the Nepalese territory begins. Say, if Tibet comes up to here, then Nepalese territory will begin somewhere here, and Nepal will come in here. And once again, you get to Tibetan borders. That is when you get to Arunachal and the rest. So Nepal is quite large. Now that is at the tri-junction where Indian-Tibetan boundary stops and the state of Uttarakhand ends, and Uttarakhand then starts bordering Nepal to its east. There is a tri-junction where Chinese, that is Tibetan, Indian and Nepalese territories meet. Now that tri-junction, as far as India is concerned, and as far as India's maps traditionally, nothing has changed on India's maps. Traditionally are concerned, this Lipulekh Pass falls in India and marks the tri-junction. So east of Lipulekh Pass is the Nepalese territory. In fact, if you look at the Nepalese territory closely, you will find that there is one more pass there called Tinkar Pass. So for a long time, when India was not had not opened the Lipulekh Pass, because of strained relations and other things with China. So border trade was taking place through Tinkar in Nepal. Most of that border trade is among the local tribes and local communities. In fact, this was called the Byans region. If you read up for Mughal history, in Mughal times, it was called the Byans Pargana. Pargana was a district in Mughal times. But this territory was always a part of the map of India. Now, where does this problem arise from? So let me try and once again explain to you how this region is. The way this region is constructed, remember the principle of watersheds. What is a watershed? Once again, watershed is a shelf. Oversimplifying it, but I am also giving you a video, a YouTube video as a link with this description to explain to you what is a watershed. So a watershed, you see Niagara Falls, you see all these streams falling down. You see any of these mountainous areas where a lot of streams will fall down. So if this is the crest of a mountain, long one, we are talking geography, not minor territory. Then you find one stream coming down, one coming down, and then they go and meet someplace, and that becomes a river. So when the British defined this border, they defined the India-Nepal border along what is called as Kali River, now Mahakali River. Now, the British understanding was, and that is the Indian understanding, that the river begins where all these streams join, that is the river. The Nepalese said, no, the river begins at the watershed. So where all these streams are falling, and obviously they will then calculate from the westernmost stream. So they say, no, you don't begin the border from here, where the river begins. You begin the border from here, where the first stream starts towards the Mahakali River, which means area from here to here is theirs, and shift the border from here to here. It's not that much territory. It's only 5.5 kilometers. But 5.5 kilometers, and it comes to about 35 square kilometers. But what that means is that the southern end of Lipulekh Pass then belongs to Nepal, which means India does not have direct access to Lipulekh Pass. Either India has to do it then with concurrence of Nepal government, or India has to find some other way of entry or exchanges with the Chinese on the Tibetan side. That obviously is not acceptable to India. Plus, this land has been with India for a long time. India has had a border outpost at Lipulekh. It's been an ITBP, Indo-Tibetan Border Police outpost for a very long time. Before that, the police managed it. The Chinese have accepted this. In 1991, there was an accord whereby this was opened up. In 1954, in the India-Chinese Border Trade Treaty, this was counted as one of the points at which border trade will take place. After that, there was a Chinese-Nepalese border treaty, border settlement in 1961, in October 1961, just a year before the war between India and China, where again the border was reckoned to be close to Tinkar Pass. In fact, that's where the border pillar number 1 of India-Nepal border is located. But Nepal said that no, the British had shifted the border, and for that there is a complex history, as there is with much of the borders, particularly Himalayan borders, in the subcontinent, because much before the Cold War began. So in the 19th century, Cold War was a 20th century phenomenon. What we saw in the 19th century was a Great Game. So Great Game was the 19th century Cold War, and that was fought right. We were at the heart of that war, because that was between three big empires, that is the Russians, the Chinese, and the British located in India. They were all jostling with each other to control the high Himalayas. That was the Great Game. In the Great Game, East India Company was pushing the Nepalese out of India. Now, Nepal had become quite expansionist. It was quite a strong power. This was just 200 years ago. And Nepal had occupied a lot of territories which were not its own. So Sikkim, today Sikkim was occupied by Nepal. A lot of Garhwal, Kumaon, in fact, right up to Kangra, Dharamshala, west of the Satluj River, all that area was occupied by the Nepalese. So a series of battles took place or wars took place between the British and the Nepalese between 1815, 1814. These were the first Anglo-Nepalese wars. And the British side, that is the East India Company, was led by Lieutenant General David Auchterlonie. So Auchterlonie pushed the Nepalese back and then got them to sign a treaty which was called the Treaty of Sugauli. Now, Sugauli is a place in East Champaran, very much a Kipling place. In fact, Sugauli finds mention in some of Kipling's stories. So, at Sugauli, there was a treaty where the Nepalese agreed to return the territories they had occupied 12 years earlier. So that is Garhwal, Kumaon, parts of Himachal Pradesh, and then Sikkim, etc., the Nepalese gave up. Now, for 12 years, they were in occupation, and from whatever I read, it was not a gentle occupation. It was quite a rough and rude occupation, quite brutal also. History, long time's gone. Now, in the course of time, the British and the Nepalese fought again because the Nepalese did not like this treaty. Their pride was hurt. It was a bit like what we later call the Treaty of Versailles. It was like a very one-sided, or as they saw it, it was one-sided. So they fought again. There were more wars, and now the British reached right up to Kathmandu, at which point the Nepalese settled again. And when they settled again, they ceded more territories to the British, and they also became a kind of associated state or a British-controlled state. So they came under British suzerainty. Then time moves on, 1857. 1857, East India Company is now facing this big revolt from Indian mutineers and Indian freedom fighters. Then they need help. And then ruler of Nepal, Jang Bahadur Rana, I think, he offered the British help and came at the head of his own very tough, very well-trained army of 10,000 and helped the British swing that war in their favor. In fact, Lucknow fell to the British thanks to his forces, his troops. And then the British and the Nepalese made final peace, and the British also, as they always did in colonial times, divide and rule and reward their own, punish those who fight with you. So they rewarded the Nepalese. At that point, they gave a lot of the territories back to Nepal, particularly in the Tarai, so areas like Janakpur, the birthplace of Sita, and Kapilvastu, they were given back to Nepal. Large tracts of the Tarai were given back to Nepal. And in 1865, the map was again redrawn. In that map, the Nepalese say that the British shifted the borders a little bit in this Tri-Junction area to cover the Watershed heights as well. Now, the conspiracy theory from the Nepalese side, and this is the strategic conspiracy theories, British had deliberately done it because they wanted under their control a feature called Mount Api, which is about 20,000 feet. And from there, you get a clear view of most of Tibet, because Tibet is lower, Tibet is a plateau. So the British did not want to lose that, and they did it for that reason. Now, we don't know whether it happened like that or not, because the maps from earlier, which you can see, including Kumaon, Gazetteers and others later, they tell you that this border did not change. Most likely, the river changed its course. Rivers change their course all the time. Remember, the Treaty of Sugauli was in 1816, 204 years ago. A lot happens geographically, particularly in the Himalayas, in 204 years. Now, nevertheless, even if you might say that, oh, this is not the border that was drawn in the Treaty of Sugauli on the Nepalese side, then the counter is that similarly, the borders of the Tarai are not the same as were drawn in the Treaty of Sugauli, because the British also gave a lot of territories to Nepal. So if you took those territories, huge territories, then this small territory, you can't complain about this and keep the rest. So that is where the two rival positions now remain. But there is trouble, because Nepal also has its nationalism. Nepal also has its domestic politics. Nepal's ruler now, that is KP Sharma Oli is very sick. He's just had his second kidney transplant. He's not particularly friendly to India now. He used to be, but he's now being pushed within his own party because he's the co-chair of his party with Prachanda. The party is now pushing, or a section of the party is pushing, saying one man, one post. So you can either be the president, prime minister, or you can be party chief. If he's not party chief, then he loses control of the party. He and Prachanda are also rivals. So all that tamasha is going on there, and that's why the Nepalese are also protesting much more strongly. So that is where we stand now. Otherwise, once again, India and Nepal have settled all their borders. Only two areas remain. One is this one, Lipulekh, and the other, a tiny one, in fact bigger than this, but also a tiny one, is along Tarai. That's called Susta. If this is 35 square kilometers, Susta is about 140 kilometers. So once again, I explained to you the watershed problem. India believing that the watershed remains in India, that the river does not begin at the watershed. The river begins when all the rivulets come and join and becomes Mahakali River. So if you look at this watershed, then from the base of Lipulekh Pass comes a river called Lipu. From the other side, from what is called as Punta's Peak, comes Tera Gad. Gad is a rivulet in local language. And then it comes down, and another rivulet comes from Om Parvat, and another rivulet comes from the other side, from a pass called Limpiyadhura. When these two also come in, and one comes from Mount Api, when all these come in, they join in, then Mahakali comes into being. That's what India believes. The Nepalese would say no. From the moment on the watershed, any rivulet starts, that will ultimately become Mahakali or join Mahakali. Our territories begin from there. But remember, all this is just means shifting the border 5.5 kilometers this side or 5.5 kilometers that side over a length of about 7 kilometers only. So it's 35 square kilometers, but very critical and very strategic. In 2015, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang came to India, and then there was an agreement which opened border trade more formally through three Himalayan passes or three Tibetan passes. These were Nathula in Sikkim, Shipkila in Himachal, and Lipulekh in Uttarakhand. So once again, there was no ambiguity that Lipulekh belongs to India, and Lipulekh is the pass that connects India with the Chinese autonomous region of Tibet.